Hello and welcome back to Continental Club, where we discuss the hottest topics in European football for the third week in a row on our new home of Football Daily every Thursday afternoon. Get excited for the hottest topics in European football. And I've got the best of Football Daily's European knowledge with me. It's Michael McCubbin and Henry Hill. Welcome to the show, guys. What a week it's been. The final has been decided. Henry, we were watching Real Madrid versus Man City last night in central London. Had an excellent time all together. But what a performance from Man City.
Just want to address the fact that we've got new
well said.
Microphone stands? I don't know what they're called. Arms. Yeah. It feels like we're in a kind of a Mad Max kind of metallic cage here. I also feel like maybe I'm just a floating head in this brown shirt.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, back to the football. What a performance. That City game might be the most dominant sort of superpower versus superpower performance I've ever seen. It was electric. It was amazing. It was overwhelming, and you could see it coming from about minute 5, couldn't you? So yeah, but no, we were at Clubhouse 5, the new home of Sunday Vibes. Really good setup there. It was really nice. Looked after us very well, and yeah, what a game. So yeah, do go down if you're in Chinatown and you think, you know what, don't want any Chinese food. Fancy a football game instead. Head to Clubhouse 5. So yeah, it was really good. But yeah, City unbelievable. We'll get onto it, I imagine, in a bit. I still think Inter can put up a fight against them. They have to be perfect, but I still think they've got enough in their arsenal to cause them in a one-off game in a neutral location where their fans will be louder. I still think they've got an opportunity.
Yeah, that Istanbul factor might be one. A lot of Italians, I imagine, will travel over to Turkey. McCubbs, let's quickly touch on Real Madrid. Really disappointing night for them. Couldn't get their bigger players into the game.
Couldn't at all. I think it was like 15 minutes in? Benzema drops deep to pick up the ball. Is it Rodri? Just like literally just nips, just takes it off him straight away. And it's just like, it just felt like, this guy's not going to get a chance. And he didn't. Like, did they have a shot in the box all game? It was a bit mad, like how, I agree, Henry, like I can't remember a Champions League semi-final where one team dominated the other so much, and especially two teams of such stature. Like, it was billed as the two best teams in Europe. Like, if Real Madrid are the second best team in Europe, then, I mean, God knows how long it's going to take for anyone to catch Man City. I don't necessarily believe they are the second best team in Europe, but it was... Yeah, it was mad, like just how much they wilted, really, and you have to credit obviously Pep. I think he just, his setup was just perfect. They were just able to press them off the park for the entire game. I just can't remember Real Madrid having a meaningful chance aside from they didn't have a meaningful chance. It was just the Kroos like that great strike, and then the Alaba free kick. Lovely free kick. Yeah, but I'm trying to actually think of something clever. I'm trying to think of something clever to say about this game, but it's just think everyone in that City team just played the game of their lives, and I guess if there's a mitigating factor. Okay, Real Madrid's defence is, it's not like a proper settled defence. Like Camavinga has played great at left back, and especially in possession, he is great, but he is still not a left back. And I think that that he was slightly at fault for that first goal. Arguments that maybe Rudiger should have started over Militao. But yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for Courtois, it would have literally would have been 8-0. So can't really argue with it.
What's scary about the City side is I think they've got everyone available. They've played almost as many games as possible this season, and yet it feels as if they've got a full strength squad. They could bring on Foden and Alvarez at the end, set up and score that amazing goal, probably one of my favourite goals I've seen this season. It's just frightening how much depth they've got, frightening how in tune they are as a team. And yeah, I think Grealish said it. They feel invincible at the moment. They look it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they did this without Haaland having one of his better ties, really. I mean, I know that second header in particular that McCubbs mentioned, the Courtois save, is one of the saves of the tournament, in my opinion. But still wasn't really that involved compared to normal. It was really Bernardo and Grealish, I thought, who had quite poor first legs, I thought, particularly Bernardo, who really came to the fore in this game. And Bernardo was absolutely sensational. His close control, his ability to beat Camavinga. Camavinga didn't really know how to deal with him. And as McCubbs says, it's a little bit harsh to hammer him because he's not a natural left-back. But that was as one-sided as any Real Madrid game I think I've ever seen. Potentially, maybe that Ajax defeat, I think they lost to them 4-1 in one of those 2019 ties. But that was a much more even tie. I've never seen a demolition like it. It was most impressive. But on Tuesday night, we saw Inter Milan make their first final since 2010, sealed through that Lautaro Martinez winner. Again, AC Milan showed flashes. Perhaps Brahim Diaz was the best chance, really. After about 10 minutes, they needed that to go in. But anyway, we asked Baderbal from the Sempre Milan YouTube channels and Baderbal YouTube channel to say what he thought about the game and, crucially, what this means for Milan going into this summer. Here's a little clip.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. I think any analysis of Milan's season has to start in the summer. We get this ownership change fresh off of winning the title, and we get rewarded with this incredibly low budget that results in our two biggest signings being 32 million for Charles de Ketelare and Divock Origi on a free transfer with high wages, both of whom give you absolutely nothing throughout the season. You add to that the fact that we lost two starting level players in Frank Kessie to Barcelona and Alessio Romagnoli to Lazio, and it's a recipe for disaster. Maldini holds some blame for that kind of summer, but at the same time he's the one who formed the core of this team, and that's the positive area here, is that there's only a mini overhaul needed, because there is a core of players that you can go forward with. Mike Maignan, Teo Hernandez, Tomori, Chao, Kalulu, Benasser, Tonali, and Rafael Leao. That's a group of 8 guys that you can spearhead the future with. I think this summer, you go striker, you go center midfielder to challenge the two guys we mentioned, and right wing, which has been needed for about 3 years. In these Inter games specifically, I think there was a tactical naivety, a little bit of disrespect to the kind of hold the play Inter strikers can play. Constantly they were beating up press with long balls, Dzeko bringing it down, and it would just constantly cause these huge gaps between midfield and defense. You also saw there was just a lack of talent. We basically only have an 11. And Leao missed the first leg, Benasser missed the second leg, and you end up with 100 minutes of Junior Messias on the left foot, crossing it 7 yards above everybody's head. The lack of mobility in our striker play with 36-year-old Giroud, that was another glaring issue. Those two things really limited anything that we could do against a deep block once they had the lead. But like I said, it's 2 to 3 signings. I really have believed 2 to 3 signings, and you're right back to the things we were doing last season.
Massive thanks to Baderbal. Their excellent thoughts as ever about Milan and where they go from here, whether Pioli's under pressure, the signings they need, etc. Henry, let's quickly touch on Inter Milan. What do they need to go their way? And how do they exert any authority in this game? Is it just a simple sense of really being really deep and counter-attacking, or do they try and challenge Man City's weaker areas, potentially left back?
Well, at the moment in time, we'll get onto it a bit later because they're featuring in big match predictions. But they've I think 8 straight victories at the moment. Scored 22, conceded 3 in that time. They're not conceding goals at the moment. So they've got a very tight defence. And they've got an attack which you can mix it up. And I think that's going to be so important. Lukaku or Dzeko, whoever starts alongside Lautaro, is going to have the game of their lives. They're going to have to try and dominate that back line as much as possible. They just need to find a way to progress the ball as high as possible. And I think actually we have seen the one time Real Madrid did have a bit of luck on the wings, certainly in the first leg, sort of breaking through. And I know Kyle Walker's just been excellent across the 2 legs. But I think any success for Inter is going to come through DiMarco or Dumfries on the other side. That is really where they're going to be able to get in behind, because Rodrigo didn't really have the pace to upset the back line, I thought, over the 2 legs, whereas Dumfries really can. So if they can try and get their wide players into it, try and get a foothold in the game, then they are a cut monster. Inzaghi will know what to do. And I think a lot of talk, certainly from the FD guys, that this City team are going to roll over them. I don't think that's true at all. I saw Carlo Garganese getting very upset on Twitter about whether or not about Premier League opinions on the Italian sides. But I do think that Inter have the weapons to upset this Man City side in moments, and they have the confidence and the belief going into it. This is a huge game for them. This is an absolutely massive game, and in a one-off game, a final. I think it's massively naive to assume a team with so many world-class players, which they do have throughout the side, to assume that they can't do something against this City team, I think, is a bit silly. Yeah, for sure. And they go in with it with nothing to lose as well. They are such massive underdogs, probably the biggest underdogs in the last 10 years. Maybe Spurs and Liverpool in that 2019 final would be included in that as well.
But they are an excellent cup team. They won the Coppa Italia last year. They obviously made the knockouts last year. Were quite unfortunate to go out against Liverpool, I thought. They're in the Coppa Italia final this year. And they're peaking at just the right time in this season. And Macabs, they've got some defenders in Bastoni, Acerbi and Darmian, who had a great tie as well, that you think maybe could stop this City side. What do you think?
I mean, maybe. I mean, they'll have to play out their skins. I think the worry with Inter is it's not so much the back three. It's who's playing in front of them. Like Çalhanoğlu's been playing kind of almost in the holding midfielder role, and it's like that's fine. That's fine when you're playing, when you're playing week in week out Serie A. But when you're playing Man City, it's just it's completely different, isn't it? I'd be interested to see whether Brozovic actually comes back into the team for that. Well, I don't know, but he's been so out of favour, hasn't he? But I think that's where I'd worry. I think central midfield, or at least the holding midfield position, I think is where City could really exploit them, and that's kind of where they tend to dominate teams anyway, isn't it? And you saw them do that against Real Madrid, who have a far more established central midfield. But yeah, I think Inter, they're pretty much the form team in Europe, aside from Man City. In some ways, I think they'd want to play that final this weekend rather than in 3 weeks' time. It's such a late final this year. There's so much time between them. I kind of feel like Inter would want to, just get kind of play right now when they've got so much momentum. But I think Man City will probably still win. It could be comfortable, but I can't imagine it's going to be more than a 2-goal win if they do. I could see it being really tight. I think it'll be great, and also I think it's just great to see Simone Inzaghi get his have his moment. No matter what happens in this game, I think his managerial career has. I think it's deserved a moment like this.
100%. Henry?
I was going to say, I remember the gap is what basically killed Tottenham, because they were in good form, and then it was so long until the final that it really, I think they had to play some random friendlies beforehand. At least with this season, it will roll into the final. I think Inter still got 4 games to go until that final, so they'll hopefully arrive in some kind of form. And as we'll talk later, they do have the ability to flex that squad and keep players fresh just so they can be ready for that game.
Yeah, thank goodness their form in Serie A has picked up so much, because you wouldn't want a really intense Champions League run for qualifying for next year, and then have this final to deal with, of course, as well. But anyway, let's get into the main part of the show, guys. Today we're talking about the perfect replacements for your club legend. There's been some massive retirements or players moving on in the last week or so, and there's no better place, McCubs, to kick off then with Sergio Busquets. I mean, what a player, what a legend. Barcelona have to find some way of replacing him.
Yeah, it's a difficult one with Busquets, isn't it? I mean, he probably could have carried on for another year or two. He's still ranked 7th in the squad for minutes played this season. But yeah, I mean, his career is obviously ridiculous. He's arguably, in some people's minds, he's the greatest defensive midfielder of all time. I don't know whether necessarily.
In your mind?
I don't know. It's a big call, isn't it? He's definitely top 2, top 3. But let's not get into that. But
that's a different debate.
Yeah, but 720 appearances.
He's really good.
He's not bad, is he? He's not bad. 9 La Liga titles. 7 Copas del Rey. Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous. Ridiculous career. Only Xavi and Messi have made more appearances than him for Barca in their history. And he's still producing the numbers of a world-class midfielder. In terms of his ability to, progress play, etc. He's still one of the best in the world. And there's a reason why, someone as good as Frankie de Jong wasn't able to kind of usurp him over the last couple of years in a way that many people would have expected him to. So in some ways, I kind of think trying to find someone to be the replacement for a player like this is almost a monk's game. I feel like almost no team has ever managed it really. United for years tried to replace Keane, it just never happened. And I think
so
that
would you spread the load?
Well, a little bit. I think they just have to rethink the midfield in some ways. And I think for example, Frankie de Jong can do a ton of defensive work. Is he going to be the 6? Not necessarily, but is he going to have to pick up some of that work? Yeah, for sure. Gavi is a press machine.
Tenacious.
The midfield doesn't have to have a Busquets necessarily, or have someone at Busquets' level. But yeah, there are like a number of options that they could look at. Ruben Neves has obviously, Fabrizio Romano says that they've already agreed personal terms with him. Julian Lopetegui is apparently, happy to let him leave because, he wants to play Champions League football, and he's obviously been a great servant to Wolves as well. The problem is the money. £45 million, I think, Wolves want for him.
That's a lot.
I actually thought they'd sell for more as one of their better players.
But he's got his contracts up next year.
Fair.
So yeah, otherwise, I think it would be more. And it's a difficult one with Neves because he just hasn't played in a possession system for the majority of his career. So his kind of passing numbers are not amazing. But he still ranks, I think, in the top 20% of midfielders for progressive passes, which is fine. Like that's fine given the team that he plays in. He really is the kind of the guy, like the main kind of ball progressor or the main progressive passer in that team. But yeah, it wouldn't be without its risk, I wouldn't say. But I personally prefer Manuel Ugarte as a shout. I think just in terms of they spoke about him a lot on Sunday Vibes last week. Joe was comparing him to N'Golo Kante, and he does profile kind of similarly in that he's just an absolute tackle machine. I think he averages something like 6 tackles and interceptions a game or around that in a really high possession side as well. He's great on the ball. He's a really good dribbler, so he's basically completely press resistant. I think he profiles the most similarly to Busquets, essentially out of all the players that they're being linked with, and the fact that he seems to be so well developed for his age as well. Like he's only 22, and he's only really had one. Well, he's only had one full season of starting every game for Sporting CP. They signed him from Millicao in 2021. Before that, he was at Phoenix in Uruguay, which is where he's from.
So do you think there's a risk there in that he's quite raw?
Maybe, but also I just think he just looks unreal. Like he looks like he's going to be one of the best midfielders in the world in the next few years. And he's already pretty experienced as well. Like he made his first team debut in Uruguay at 15. He was captaining them at 18.
Really?
So he's pretty mature for his age. And there just doesn't seem to be really any defects in his game, whereas with other players like Martin Zubamendi, Xavi is apparently very keen on as well.
I see this guy, the Barca fans on Twitter seem to be very hot on Martin Zubamendi.
And the thing is with Zubamendi, I think Zubamendi's one of those ones where it's like I think there are like areas of his game where he lacks, but he's also really, really effective, and it's one of those ones where I feel like you kind of have to take the stats with a pinch of salt, because his passing doesn't really pop. His like tackle numbers aren't particularly amazing either. But when you do watch him play, it's clear that without him, that midfield would probably crumble a bit. And I think he basically kind of allows Mikel Merino to do what he does.
Do everything.
I kind of feel like Zubamendi, and in some ways, again, that is a bit Busquets-like, isn't it? But like Busquets has always allowed the other players in that midfield to really strut their stuff, especially in the Xavi and Iniesta days. In some ways, I would kind of trust them on Zubamendi, but I just think Ugarte just has a bigger all-round game than both him and Neves. The problem is with Ugarte, you're potentially going toe-to-toe with Liverpool, potentially going toe-to-toe with Aston Villa, who do have spending power compared to Barcelona. So yeah, I think that's the main issue, and it's just about whether are they going to pour the majority of their resources into finding this kind of Busquets replacement this summer, or are they going to focus it on other areas and kind of make do with Frankie and Franck Kessié? And because it's not like their midfield is still fairly stacked. It's just I would probably go for Ugarte if they can, just because I think that's that's a real statement signing.
Yeah, for sure. And Sporting have made so much money on transfers in recent times. I mean, Spurs have that obligation to buy Pedro Porro. They sold Nuno Mensch relatively recently, Mateus Nunes, João Palhinha last summer. Like, they've absolutely smashed it in the transfer market once again. Henry, would you be concerned if you're a Barcelona fan that it seems like they are seemingly more focused, or as focused on bringing back Messi than on really nailing this Busquets replacement?
Yes. I mean, bringing back Messi is so important to their overall brand, and I think there's talk of him having his own sort of museum within the new Camp Nou. And So I think commercially it is an amazing idea for Barcelona, who need any kind of penny they can get at this point. But when you look at that forward line, Lewandowski, he's going to be all right. I'd be an interesting link up between the two. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily make sense. It would change their structure a little bit and how they play. Because I don't think Messi would want to be pushed out to like the wing anymore. He prefers being a bit more a deep line playmaker at this point in his career. So I do think it's a bit odd. I also do. I think like Kessié has hardly played this season. So realistically, they could get someone like Ugarte. They could get someone younger in, and then bring Kessié into the team, move Frankie de Jong a bit, and give him like a year to kind of bed into the side. Because I think it's a lot of pressure being told you're going to replace Sergio Busquets. Yeah. That doesn't really make sense to me. And I think some weight needs to be taken off Pedri. He's played way too much football at this point. So yes, I do think they need to focus more importantly on this central midfield signing than Messi. But I can also understand why, just for almost like a confidence boost, bringing back Messi is so important to them.
Yeah, it feels very sentimental, doesn't it? It's a really nice end to his career, of course, and I prefer that he goes to Barcelona because I think he's got so much more to give to European football than Saudi Arabia. But it just feels like what Barcelona have been really good at this year is their defensive solidity, and Messi is just not going to press in the same way that those other midfielders will. And as you say, I don't think he's going to play in the forward line, so you're potentially affecting the minutes of Pedri and Gavi, which is potentially a good thing in the long term, and taking away some of that defensive solidity. So if I was them, I'd focus primarily on the Busquets replacement and getting in a right back as good as Jules Koundé has been there. The fact they're signing a centre-back in Inigo Martinez suggests to me that they want to play Jules Koundé and continue to play him as a right back. But it's an interesting one, Barcelona's potential transfer business. Guys, who would you sign as the Busquets replacement? Let's move on to Min Jae, Henry, and you will tell me in a second who that came in from. I can't quite remember. But yeah, there's been lots of speculation this week that he could be joining Man United, but then his agent has come out yesterday and sort of denied that. So who did this come in from first?
So it comes in from @Tahif's Afro. Didn't actually recommend a replacement, so I've had to dig around for that.
Poor you. Doing your job.
Oh, God. So, yeah.
I dug out 3, by the way, for Busquets, so you're slacking a bit.
Very good job. Very good job. At least Twitter helped you, I'm sure. But,
I didn't, actually.
But yeah, Min Jae, maybe he's going to leave. It's essentially... The story is that Manchester United have said they will trigger his release clause, which is open for like 15 days in July.
When he's on military service or something.
Is that right? So it's about 56 million euros. So, and I think, the wages he'd get at United are substantially better. So I can understand why he's perhaps tempted to go for that. And actually, considering they paid 18 million euros for him, to flip him for 56 in one season is pretty impressive. But he is going to be really hard to replace if he does go, because not only is he a clearance and like aerial win monster, he's also one of the most progressive carriers and passers in Serie A this season in total. So he's so important to the way that this Napoli team move up the pitch and their sort of very fluid passing style. So replacing that isn't easy. That's what I mean. He is a gem in that regard. I've had a look. So I've sort of gone for 3 different options. Different kind of price points.
Forward 3 as well. I like it.
Yeah. So I think if they're looking domestically, because let's bear in mind that Napoli's business, we discussed it a few weeks ago. They've been really smart at picking out kind of players where no one else is really looking. But yeah, Xhaka Bijol, who's a Udinese centre half, 24-year-old Slovenian international, got 40 caps for his country. He's like the 6th most used player in their squad. They bought him for 4 million euros from CSKA Moscow last summer, so he's been brilliant this season. 85% pass success rate, massive clearance and aerial win numbers, 3 goals and 2 assists. So he's sort of a bit like Kim, busy in the box, up at corners. And I've watched him. He's quite a big guy. He's confident centre half. I think they can maybe explore that. His passing numbers aren't as huge, but then again, Udinese's style of play isn't the same as Napoli, so that's something to look at. I think the next player would be a massive test of what kind of player Napoli can attract at this point. Osimhen Others from Ajax, who they
links with Bayern and Dortmund.
Links with Bayern and Dortmund too, but Ajax are going to need to sell. They've had an absolute stinker of a season. I don't think they're even going to make the Champions League qualification at this point. They're behind PSV. Osimhen Others, obviously, he was subject to a bid from Chelsea last year. Maybe dodged a bullet on that one, but yeah, he's a really kind of aggressive, similar.
Could you see him moving into centre back though? Because he's been used primarily as a defensive midfielder.
He switches between the two.
Yeah.
I think you could see him moving back into centre half. Even if Lobotka went, then I think he'd be an interesting sort of player in the middle there. He's just such a technical guy.
Yeah.
He's very, very aggressive.
Unit as well, he's big.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like him. He could cost up to 50 million euros, which would basically be putting their money. Back into him. So I'd be interested to see Edson Alvarez, or Mexican as well. So it would already have links to the club. And then Konstantinos Mavropanos. I think actually that is the one to go for. I think this guy's, when you look at his FB ref numbers, it's just green. The whole thing's green. He's a colossal centre half, and I think he's too good for Stuttgart now. He's outgrown his time at Stuttgart. He could be going down this season. 4.4 progressive passes, 1.2 progressive carries per 90. These are all among the highest rates for a centre half in Germany this season. He's massive clearance and area win numbers, really busy in the tackle. Apparently Inter Milan, Eintracht Frankfurt and West Ham apparently are linked with everyone that I was searching for at the moment. But yeah, I think for 15 million euros, Mavropanos, you'd be silly not to go for him, because he was a steal when Stuttgart got him in the first place, and I think he could be a steal for whoever takes him next. So yeah, still young as well, got over his fitness issues, which were kind of hindering him for a long time. I'd be really interested to put him in a side where he can play on the front foot instead of having to constantly sort of be under barrage, which he's been at Stuttgart for 2 seasons.
Fair enough. Yeah, I like the shout. I think they recently extended Rahmani's contract as well, although I don't think he's anywhere near as Kim's standard, and I don't think Leo Ostergaard is either, although he is quite an aggressive central defender. But yeah, they definitely need to bring someone in. I think Mavropanos is a good shout. Let's move on to Leonardo Bonucci. This came in from Carl Roeder, who suggested Thiago Jallo as his replacement. Now, Bonucci, you would have no doubt seen this week, has announced his retirement at the end of the season. Another Juventus stalwart gone. 773 career appearances, 653 for 6 clubs. He's also got 120 caps for Italy, 4th on the all-time list. I think he was just behind Fabio Cannavaro and Buffon, and one other player is in front of him, maybe Pirlo, I can't remember.
Maybe Dino Zoff.
Maybe Dino Zoff, yes. But yeah, he's 6th on the all-time list for Juve. Obviously, actually had quite a weird start to his career, like jumped around quite a few different clubs, didn't work at Inter Milan. But ever since arriving at Juve, that partnership, particularly in that peak with Barzagli and Chiellini, Bonucci, it was probably the best defence in Europe, and he was a key part of that. He was definitely the most progressive with his passing. Probably not got that warrior status that Chiellini does, but I thought Bonucci for a time was probably the best ball-playing centre-back in the world. And his form has understandably dipped now. He's 36 years old. He's only played 780 Serie A minutes this season. He's been replaced by Gatti. Bremer's come in and shown him to be, just not quite the centre-back that he was. And time comes for us all, as my hairline suggests. And Bonucci has had it in the last 18 months on the pitch. He's now in the bottom 21% for tackles and interceptions. And even his progressive passing, which was once his great skills, now in the bottom 44% of centre-backs. But yeah, amazing servant. Great for Italy as well. Scored the equaliser in the Euro 2020 final. Scored a penalty in the shootout as well. Heartbreak for England. And yeah, he will, no doubt remember that for the rest of his life. And with Chiellini having moved to the MLS last year, quite pleased that Bonucci's just called it a day, actually. But in terms of his possible replacement, so Carl Roeder suggested Thiago Jallo, who's that 23-year-old Portuguese centre-back who plays for Lille. He can also play at fullback as well. He was at Milan before that, and then Sporting, another Sporting CP academy graduate. He's made 25 Ligue 1 appearances this season, but Kyle, I don't know whether you knew, he did his ACL in March, so he is just not going to be the Bonucci replacement. I don't know how long that takes. It takes at least 6 months in most cases, so they're just not going to go for him right now, although he does seem like a really promising centre-back, so maybe one to keep an eye on. The probably dream replacement would probably be someone like Matthias de Ligt, but that ship has now sailed, which is just a bit of a shame. He's gone, obviously, and now at Bayern, he's probably been their best centre-back this season, but a ball-playing centre-back, really physical, was slowly adapting to Serie A's demands, and I think he's enjoyed the sort of a bit more freedom at Bayern. He's enjoyed the sort of training schedule, etc. But yeah, it's obviously not going to be de Ligt either. I thought Rennes Arthur Thiet might be worth looking at. I think I'm pronouncing that right. He's the Belgian centre-back at Rennes. Played at Bologna in 21-22, so he's got some Serie A experience. But yeah, around 89% pass completion, around 70 passes per game for a Rennes side that have, gone in fits and starts this season, but might be up for a move. He's broken into the Belgium squad recently. He's been sort of earmarked as that long-term Vertonghen, Alderweireld, Vermaelen replacement in that great centre-back. generation that has now passed, and he's in the top 2% for progressive passes, in the top 6% for passes completed in Europe. This is a guy excellent on the ball, definitely one to keep an eye on, and would be the sort of smart pickup that Juve used to do all the time. And they might not have that much money this summer because we don't know whether this 15-point deduction is going to be put back into place. So yeah, someone on the cheap like him might be worth having a look at. Arthur Thiat, I think that's how you pronounce it. But yeah, have a look at him for sure. Right, let's move on to Jude Bellingham. Iron Cub has suggested Enzo Lefebvre McCarves.
Yeah.
Jude Bellingham,
Love
there's
it.
no guarantee
Yeah.
that he's going to leave, but if he does leave, that's a huge hole to fill.
Huge hole to fill, but I think Enzo. I think Iron Cub has got this on the money. I think Enzo Lefebvre is almost the best like for like you can get, or as close to a like for like
The
you
McCub
can
stamp
get
of
to
approval.
Jude Bellingham. Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's not as physically big as Jude Bellingham, but he, in terms of his profile as a midfielder, like yeah, he's just great. It's mad that like there was talk of him going to Bournemouth before they signed Ouattara from Lorient. But if you're not familiar with Enzo Lefebvre, he's a 23-year-old midfielder who plays for Lorient in France and has been, you know, pretty pivotal to them kind of establishing themselves as a Ligue 1 side again since getting promoted in 2020. Yeah, he's just been one of the most impressive midfielders in France, full stop. Like his ability to kind of control games but also be able to provide an attacking threat is just quite rare. Can play as a defensive midfielder, can play as a box-to-box midfielder, can play as an attacking midfielder. He's always been quite creative. I think he's got 15 assists across the last 3 seasons, which in a side which, you know, isn't particularly dominant is pretty impressive for a central midfielder. And he's added goals to his game this year as well. I think he's got 5 in the league this term. So yeah, I think he'd be great, and you know, it's not just. But the thing is, it's not just Bellingham who needs replacing this summer. Like Mahmoud Dahoud looks like he's going to Brighton, doesn't he? And yeah, like you say, Dukes. Yeah, Bellingham's not definitely going to go, but if he does, yeah, they've got 2 midfielders to sign essentially, and if you can get someone in who's incredibly versatile like Enzo Lefebvre and is talented in multiple facets of the game, then, you know, I think you're onto a winner already there, because yeah, it just means that whoever you sign in that second midfield slot doesn't have to be quite as well rounded. You can maybe sign a bit more of a specialist. But yeah, I really, really like Lefebvre. He surely is going to leave Lorient this summer. And I think Dortmund, yeah, it just seems like a really kind of Dortmund-like signing, doesn't he? And especially given that, you know, like I think Bundesliga clubs have really had a lot of success in recruiting from Liga in recent seasons. So yeah, I think Lefebvre is would be a fantastic signing for them.
Well done, Arn Cub. Yeah. Excellently explained by our very own Cub as well. McCurbs, that was excellent. Right, quickly on Enzo Lefebvre, it's really, really pleasing. I was listening to a podcast the other day with Julien Laurent, and he was saying about his background. His father was a gangster, and he had a really difficult start in life. So amazing that he's got to this stage of his career, and I hope he gets a great move if he wants one, or continues to go from strength to strength, because that's a really impressive turnaround. Henry, let's talk about Hussein Kasser's suggestion. Sorry, Hussein, don't think I pronounced that right. Who wants Zlatan to be replaced by Scamacca?
Yeah.
You like it?
Yes, I do like it. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think it's possible. Zlatan looks done. I mean, that's quite a brutal way of saying it, but yeah, 144 minutes this year. He had some knee surgery, which at this age, 41 years old, that's pretty brutal, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, but what a guy. We don't need to dwell on him, do we? Scamacca, though, a weird season, really weird season. I mean, but you could say that for most of West Ham. Yeah, I thought he looked really promising at the start. I thought it was an amazing deal when they got him through the door, exactly what they needed. 36 million euros. I mean, he didn't come cheap, did he? 16 in Serie A for Sassuolo in 21-22, and then 8 the season before that. So still quite a young guy, but yeah, big, powerful forward. Hasn't worked for him in the Premier League, only 3 goals. And you've seen, as push comes to shove, they've just gone back to Antonio out front.
They know.
Yeah, which is fair enough. Like,
it's worked.
Moyes has had to sort of dig them out of a hole and juggle the Conference League as well. And Antonio, you know what you're going to get from him, don't you? I think he's a brilliant forward. Still listed as a defender on Who Scored, which I quite like.
Right back.
Scamacca, He's been pretty decent in the Conference League as well. Not well beating opposition, but I remember I think it was against Silkeborg or something like that. He scored an amazing goal. So yeah, I think he scored 5 in the competition this season. So he's been a big part of them getting as far as they've got here. I do think he'd probably be more suited to go back to a Serie A club. The thing is for West Ham, and they tend to be quite good at letting players go if they want to go. They're not. I know obviously Declan Rice has been there for a long time, but in principle, they seem to be willing to take like a loss on them. But I don't think they should take a financial loss on this because apparently the deal that they're being offered is a season-long loan with a 17 million euro option to buy at the end of that. So they make a big loss on this guy, which I don't think. If you bear in mind he's contracted till 2027, Antonio's young. He's young. Antonio's 33. I think that's a bit silly. If I was West Ham and they've got the opportunity to start fresh next season, I would stick with Scamacca for a bit longer and not give him to AC Milan right now, unless the player is really agitating for a move. Apparently, he's changed his agent, so it could be happening. But yeah, it might be if I was AC Milan, because I do think they need to make a statement signing up front again to kind of address top of the show. I think Mbala and Zola from Spezia, he's 2 seasons in a row now. He's been crushing it. He's way too good for Spezia. 26 years old, got 13 goals this season. Boulaye Dia, I've more put him because he is capable of drifting wide. He could fill a role on the wings if possible. Doesn't have to play out and out centre forward. Has been for Salernitana this season. I think he's the 3rd top scorer in Serie A. 15 goals, 6 assists. He'd come from Villarreal. So they'd have to do business that way. I like Boulaye Dia a lot. I was always quite surprised that Villarreal let him go to Salernitana at the time. Or like the big signing that I've listed is Santiago Jimenez from Feyenoord. I think we've been talking about recently. He's on an absolute tear at the moment. He's scoring goals for fun. 17 goals in 2023. I think he's one of the best seasons by a Mexican striker in Europe, up with Chicharito's best at Man United, and actually Raul Jimenez, his first season at Wolves. At Wolves was pretty electric too. So yeah, I think this is one of the best. I was reading Mexican forwards in Europe in a long, long time. So yeah, 22 years old. Feyenoord, I'm slightly worried. It looks like Arne Slot might be leaving. There's so many players in that side. Always the way
when something like that happens. Yeah. They just get pilfered.
Yeah, there's so many. Hanko at left back, Koku in midfields, and then Jimenez as well. There's a lot of players that are going to be wanted across Europe. He's 22 years old. He'd be young, quite exciting. They've still got Giroud, who's probably got one more season in him. I know Origi is there as well, so there wouldn't be massive pressure on him to hit the ground running. So I think that could be a really interesting signing if Milan have the ability to buy someone like that. But I'd be intrigued to see, because his price tag's probably 30, 35, 40 million euros at this point. Do Milan put all their money in that, especially if it looks like they probably will miss out on Champions League football? It's hard to say.
No, for sure.
They do need, that is their number one priority though. They have that's where they need to strengthen, isn't it? Like that's the reason why they haven't got Champions League football this season if they don't get it. It's just because they don't have they literally just don't have a centre forward like. I'd say that maybe that's harsh on Giroud, but they don't have a goal scorer.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure on him to do basically to carry that attack all season, which I don't think he's
for sure.
quite expecting at this point.
No, for sure.
It's tough.
He did the business last year, but it's just difficult to replicate such an amazing season. Right, let's move on to Victor Osimhen. Now, this is a big one. This comes in from Bhutan Rockstar, who suggested Rasmus Højlund.
Yes.
I just think it's too early. I want him to stay at Atalanta. I feel like Atalanta could also make more money from him the following year as well, because he's only really been a starter in that side since around January time. And Duvin Zapata and Luis Muriel aren't getting any younger, of course, and they've picked up so many injury issues over the last 11, 12 months. Ademola Lookman, I'm sure, will be linked with quite a few clubs. I just don't think they sell Højlund in the same summer. They're too smart for that. And he's only 20 years old. He's played 1,500 minutes in a top 5 league. But there is serious promise there. I mean, he's got 7 goals and 2 assists in Serie A this season. That's off 17 starts, but 29 games in total. I think he's a really, really promising forward. He's like taken to the international stage really, really well. He's fast. He's dynamic. He can hold the ball up reasonably well. He's one of those sort of last shoulder defenders. Is he not that involved in play? It's kind of similar to Osimhen, to be fair, but his link-up play is probably not as polished as Osimhen's been with Lozano and Kvaratskhelia at points this season. But I just want him to stay at Atalanta for a little bit longer. I think a move could potentially be a little bit too soon for him. In terms of who Napoli could get, I think Kolo Muani's probably the dream. Really creative forward as well. I think he'd link up really effectively with that other members of the forward line. I just think he's probably got bigger ambitions than Napoli, to be honest. As brutal as that sounds, given they've just won the Scudetto. But when you're linked with PSG, when you're linked with Bayern Munich, I just don't think you probably take a move to another club who are for want of a better term, a stepping stone club. So I think, Colin Moani, I can't see going to Napoli.
I think they will have the money. If they put up 70 million or whatever Eintracht want for him, then I think it'd be quite interesting. He's seen what can happen to a player if they do well at Napoli.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just think if PSG lose Messi, if PSG potentially get rid of Neymar, they will want a statement forward.
And Kane.
Well, and I don't think they're going to get Kane. I think Osimhen, it could be Osimhen, but I think it's likely to be Colin Moani as well, going back to France. I think that move kind of makes a lot of sense, and he's super creative, he's super dynamic. I love Colin Moani. But yeah, Napoli could be an option for them. Right, let's move on to the other suggestions. We'll do this much faster because there were a number of them down here. Macubs, who do you want to kick off with?
Let's go for Thomas Müller. At WizNewski98 has suggested Mason Mount.
Juicy.
Very juicy. And at Sweetheart Neupan has suggested Florian Wirtz. I think Florian Wirtz probably makes more sense in some ways. In some ways, Mason Mount isn't that, like, in terms of like a player who's always been a little bit hard to pin down. I think there's some similarities between Mount and Müller actually, and he is like, what I like about Mason Mount is that, like, I mean, it'll be sad for him to leave Chelsea in these circumstances because it's obviously his club and the club has changed so much in the last year, and etc. Everything that's happened at Chelsea is, obviously I think it's clearly affected him quite a lot. But I am really excited to see him just in a new club, in a new environment, under a new manager. Because I just think, like, he's someone who can be, you could kind of turn him into whatever you want, really. And like playing that Thomas Müller role, I could imagine him being pretty effective at. I just think Wirtz is, almost feels kind of destined to go to Bayern at some point, doesn't he? He really is the wonder kid of German football.
Probably the more natural creator out of the two of them as well.
Yeah. I think just the more natural attacker in general. I feel like Mount still has that kind of midfielder in him. Which is great, which is what makes him brilliant. His ability to kind of juggle different roles. But like Wirtz is just, I mean, if it wasn't for that injury, like who knows who he'd be getting linked with right now.
And to come back this well as well.
Yeah.
It's just like instantly hit the ground running off an ACL or something to do with his knee, some big knee injury. Yeah. So
I think Wirtz would be the one. I just think that's what will happen at some point. But at the same time, I don't think Muller's going to retire yet, is he?
No.
I think he'll probably be fine for another year or two. So I think this is one for like a year or two. We'll come back to this one, but I do think Wirtz will probably end up at Bayern.
Yeah, and they've still got Musiala, who obviously changes a lot of minutes with Muller as well. So
I forget about that actually. Yeah, Musiala probably is the Muller replacement. Let's face it.
Fair enough. But no, an interesting discussion nonetheless. Henry, where do we want to go next?
I like, for Immobile, I like Leo Kovac, Zorakic's suggestion of Openda. We've talked about him a lot recently. I don't know if they'd be able to afford him, in all honesty. Lazio have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, very old squad.
Driving down the average age of that squad this year. Although I was reading, when I was looking at Jimenez, Feyenoord, apparently they're linked with him too. So clearly they are on the hunt for a big statement signing. A lot of the guys I was suggesting earlier, Nzola, etc., I think these are the kind of guys they should be looking at. I like, for Milan Skriniar, because they do need a quality centre back in there. Aymeric Laporta. The problem is, because they've also Stefan de Vrij has been suggested. I just think that they don't have the money to get someone like Yuri and Timber. They don't have the budget next year. I mean, although getting to the final of the Champions League is going to help them massively, it does look like they're going to qualify for the Champions League.
I read they get 100 million euros for that. I mean, they've got that massive loan to repay, haven't they?
Yeah, I think they do need to invest in a young centre half. Is Timber the right guy at the moment? He's itching for a move, and he said he wants to go to the Champions League.
He's been talking about Lissandro Martinez all year, just being like, "Oh, I miss him so much."
Really?
Yeah, he was the best, and Eric Ten Hag's great, and I think he's just clearly like, I could do with a move.
Yeah, I was reading that he's basically demanding one this year. He might looking at Liverpool, but they don't have Champions League football either at the moment.
Well,
I do like Laporta. Yeah, sorry, you're right. Maybe I do like Laporta. I think if they could get him on loan, or for a season, try him out. And I think
the only thing with him is he's left-footed, so he feels like more of a natural Bastoni replacement. But he could probably maybe play in that central role where Stefan de Vrij plays. I really like Aymeric Laporte. I think he was sensational. We were having discussions that he was up there with Van Dijk when he first arrived, and it's just fallen out of favour there slightly. Alfonso Deman, who is a Brighton fan, did suggest Manuel Locatelli as a Moses Caicedo replacement. If you could get that done, that would be sensational. Obviously played under De Zerbi for 3 years at Sassuolo, can play as that holding player, can play as an Alexis McAllister replacement as well. Hasn't had his best year at Juventus. I think it's been very difficult for a lot of Juve players. There's been a lot of chat off the pitch about their points deductions and their financial irregularities, etc. And I think it's slightly distracted a lot of members of that squad. And Rabiot has also played superbly this year. Credit, he's working for a new contract or a contract somewhere. And Manuel Locatelli at Sassuolo under De Zerbi was probably the most exciting up-and-coming Serie A central midfielder. And I don't think he's played particularly well this year, but he would be awesome for Brighton. But he was linked with Arsenal about 18 months ago. I just think he's probably got bigger ambitions than Brighton. No disrespect to them. The Cubs, could you see that happening?
I don't know if I could see it happening necessarily, but I think he would be a great. Yeah, he'd be a great replacement for sure.
Such a good passer.
Yeah, he would be so good at Brighton. But I agree. Like, do you leave? I know, like, Brighton are like the most fashionable team in the world right now. But do you actually leave Juve for Brighton? Like, if you're an Italian midfielder, like, you just don't, do you?
Yeah,
like,
especially when
you just don't.
I was just going to say, especially when De Zerbi, it feels like he will probably get a big move in the next 18 months. If you're going to Brighton for De Zerbi and then he leaves, it's going to be tricky. But guys, that is our rundown of the legends that need replacing and the supposed perfect replacements. Who did you guys think we missed out as perfect replacements? Let us know in the comments down below, and let's get on to our big match predictions. Right, it's time for big match predictions, and as ever, we review what happened last week. So Bayern Munich versus Schalke, both of you guys went for draws. Did not come out that way, not unfortunately. Quite. I went 3-0 to Bayern. It was, of course, 6-0, 1 point to me. That Bundesliga title race is the thing that's given me life in Europe right now, because Liga feels pretty boring right now. The Prem's done in most places except for relegation, and a little bit of top four. La Liga's now done, Serie A's now done. Come on, the Bundesliga. Get it down to the final day, please. Right, Inter Milan versus Sassuolo. I went for a draw. You guys both backed Inter. It seems so obvious on reflection, but no one saw that 4-2 result coming. 1 point to both of you. Henry for Lille versus Monaco. Henry backed Lille. The Cubs backed Monaco. I went for a 2-2 draw. It was actually 0-0. So unfortunately, it feels a bit flat, but that's 1 point to me. So the scores are as follows. I'm on 62. Henry's on 49. My Cubs is on 42. And we are kicking off with Bayern Munich versus RB Leipzig. Saturday, 5:30 p.m. First versus third. 8 points between them. If you are a Dortmund fan, if you are sort of looking for change in the Bundesliga, you will be praying that Leipzig get over the line. But I'll kick off with this one. I mean, they've had a really, really bad record against Bayern in the past. I think they've only beaten them once in their entire history, which is not great. Yeah, in 16 attempts with 10 defeats in that time. They've been up and down in the backstretch, but still looks like they will get third, but it's still pretty tight. I mean, they're only 4 points clear of fifth place Freiburg with 2 games to go. So they lose here, and it could get a little bit dicey, but they do play Schalke on the final game of the season. Schalke still in the relegation mire slightly as well. And then they are competing against Freiburg, who play Wolfsburg and then Hertha Berlin. So both of them have got really big, intense games this weekend before easier final fixtures. But I think Leipzig will get over the line, and Kunku looks like he's back to his best. Szoboszlai scoring at the weekend. I'm going to go... I think Bayern get over the line here. I think 2-1, but I think there might be some nervy moments in it. McCubs, do you think Bayern will do it?
Yeah, I do think Bayern will do it. It feels like they're not going to slip up now for some reason. It feels like they've had their blip. Tuchel's now fully established.
1 game a week.
Business as usual. Yeah, I was tempted to go for 2-1. I'll go for 2-0. I think to Bayern. Yeah.
Henry, you're always our crazy. Well, you both are actually pretty crazy at times.
I'll go for the old 2-2 on this one.
Really?
I reckon Leipzig will want to see a different team win the Bundesliga, and will put up a fight. Although, no, after winning 6-0 last week, what do I know? So
yeah, true. Serge Gnabry right at it at the moment as well. Let's see. Right, let's move on to Napoli versus Inter Milan. Sunday, 5 p.m. First versus third. 17 points between them. Not a big game for Napoli, but a pretty good big game for Inter. They'll be in jubilant mood. Henry, do you think they can spring a surprise? Spring a surprise.
Spring a surprise.
Can they spring a surprise?
Yeah, I don't think it'd be that surprising if Inter did win this game.
No.
In all honesty, Napoli have taken their foot off the gas. 3 wins in their
Too
last
much
10.
partying.
They, although they did kind of dominate Monza statistically, better opportunities when.
Shout out Monza as well.
Yeah, what a team! They're on an absolute rampage at the moment. But yeah, Inter. Just to go back to what we were talking, their 8 wins in a row have been included Juventus, Lazio, Roma, and twice against AC Milan. So they're beating the best of their kind of opposition at the moment.
Shoot
They've got a
Inzaghi,
really
better not
good.
miss. He's on fire.
And this is the team that they put out against Fiorentina last week. They rotated in Lukaku, Correa, Brozovic, Gagliardini, Bellanova, De Vrij, D'Ambrosio, and Handanovic, and they still won 4-2. That's depth to their squad. I forgot Gagliardini was even part of that team at one.
Yeah.
I
did a sharp intake of breath when he came on in the first leg against Milan.
They've got options there, and they've got a bit of breathing space on AC Milan behind them, 5 points clear of the team in 5th. So, and to be honest, if they win this and Juventus slip up, they could actually go 2nd, which is quite a remarkable turn of events. Yeah, I'm going to back Inter Milan to win this. I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory. I just think that Napoli not in just coasting at the moment, and I think Inter will take it to them.
Yeah, fair. A lot of distractions off the pitch, as we've already mentioned with Kim, etc. McCubs, do you see Inter getting over the line?
Yeah, I think Napoli are on the beach, to be honest. I might go 3-0 Inter.
Wow,
I know.
Big as that.
Yeah, I just think Inter, they're just so hot at the moment. They're just so hot. All their attackers are in form. I can see Lukaku coming back into this game and just absolutely dominating that back line.
Yeah, and all their forwards are because they've got this massive game to get into the side for. Yeah. They'll be right at it. I mean, watching Lukaku talk to CBS after the game with Thierry Henry and that their lineup there, you could just see that there's just real fire in his eyes, and massive credit to him because it was pretty bleak a few months ago for him, and the World Cup really didn't go his way. And for him to be in this sort of form, it's a really nice turnaround. And whether he'll be at Inter next year, whether he'll be at Chelsea, whatever, it doesn't really matter right now. Next 2 weeks, just keep going, Rom. Very proud of him.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm going to go. I think this will actually be a draw. I might go 1-1. I think Inter have bigger priorities, of course. But I think they might be a little tired from midweek as well. But let's move on to Sevilla versus Real Betis. The Seville derby, McCubs, Sunday 8 p.m, 10th versus 6th. 8 points between them. Sevilla on an absolute tear.
Ridiculous. To think that they were only outside the relegation zone on goal difference at the start of March. And I think their goal difference was only 1 or 2 goals better off than whoever. I can't remember who was in 18th at the time.
Maybe Valencia. I don't know.
No, I think it was. I can't remember. But now they're 10th, and they're only 1 point off the Europa Conference League spot. Which
and you
is
know they'll win that if they get into it.
Yeah, they'll definitely get into that. That's what they go. That's probably been their motivation. It's the final one.
Might win the Europa League.
They might. Yeah, they still might win the Europa League. They've obviously got the second leg against Juventus.
They were
tonight,
so unlucky to not win that first leg as well.
I know, yeah.
Juve robbed a draw.
Very lucky. Very unlucky. I mean, it's a huge week for Sevilla. I think that's one thing, I guess, counting against them is that they will be probably a bit tired, and whichever way it goes emotionally from Thursday night. But they are the form team in Spain since Min Jae came in at the end of March. They've won 6 of their last 8 La Liga games. They've only lost once in that time as well. Only Barca have conceded fewer goals than them in that time. When you look at their kind of expected goals and stuff, it all looks pretty good. They're ranking kind of top 4, top 3 in kind of all the important metrics. They've shored up defensively, and that and the kind of the goals are kind of coming from around the team as well. Rafa Mir,
I was going to say.
And Naziri is somehow going to end the season actually with a pretty good goals record. I think he's only 2 off double figures in the league.
Bizarre player, but respect him.
It's kind of come in fits and bursts, hasn't it? He ran pretty hot at the start of the season, and then kind of between kind of February, March, April, he was running pretty hot as well. But he's also been great in the Europa League, hasn't he? Sevilla are flying, but I mean, it's actually the one bit in La Liga which is really interesting. Actually, the relegation battle is really interesting, but also the race for 7th place, because Girona are 7th, but they're only 1 point above. So, Sevilla are only 1 point behind them in 10th, and then there's also Athletic Club and Osasuna between them. Vallecano are only 2 points behind them, and even Mallorca in 12th are 4 points behind Girona. So it could all
Don't
change
lose faith in Europe,
the race for the Europa. All the Champions League places are pretty much set. The Europa League places are pretty much set, but that one Conference League spot,
keenly contested.
It's getting hot.
Especially
Betis,
for a club like Girona, that'd be class.
Yeah, it'd be pretty brilliant, wouldn't it, for that project? Club like Osasuna have been great in the second half of the season as well. It'd be great to see them get into Europe. But Betis, not such good form, but they've pretty much secured Europa League football. They've dropped off in the top 4 race, but I guess the big one is that it's going to be Joaquin's final derby.
Yeah.
After all these years, so be a bit of an emotional one for him. I don't know how to call this game. I kind of feel like it might be a draw.
Yeah.
I think it might be a 1-1 draw this game, but I think it'll be feisty and it will be good.
Fair enough. I like it. Henry, I know you're a big Joaquin fan.
Yeah. Thiago Almada from Atlanta United. That's who they should buy.
I like
That
it.
is who they should buy. Best player in MLS by a country mile.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, I'm a huge Joaquin fan.
What a career.
What an absolute legend. He's like one of the earlier guys I remember buying on FIFA in the real early days. So yeah, I won't waste too much time. 2-1. I'm going to go for a 2-1 victory to Betis. I think that game against Juve might take it out of them. But yeah, I'll go for that for Betis. But yeah, bit of a. I think getting Europa League is as good as they could hope for this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like seeing Jose Perez on the
Popping
goal
up.
sheet last week. What a move he's had away from Leicester in the sunshine, not worrying anymore.
Yeah, not really in the limelight too much either, but fair play to him. And also, shout out to Campos as well. He had a really bad loan spell, or was it a loan spell at Ajax? Either way, I think he might have even gone permanently and then got bought back. Either way, he was shocking at Ajax and looked really unhappy there and has come back to Sevilla and done the business. In this game, I'm going to go for a simple... Did anyone go 1-0 Sevilla?
No.
I'm going 1-0 Sevilla. There we have it. Guys, that has been Continental Club for this week on Football Daily. If you guys have enjoyed it, let us know your thoughts in the comments down below about those perfect replacements and your big match predictions as well, of course. Thank you so much for watching this. Look ahead to this weekend. We have a very special Euro-themed Explained coming out on a side that are in the Europa League semi-finals. Look ahead to that. And yeah, we'll catch you next week, guys. Bye-bye.